Hey guys, what's up? It's Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and I want to talk to you today about wrestling heels, or more specifically, the best of the best, the absolute scroats that ended up being absolute goats. Because today we're going to look across the wrestling industry as a whole and try to answer who is the greatest heel of all time. Right. So what I want you to do is cast your mind back to NXT TakeOver New Orleans. For almost a full calendar year prior to it, Tommaso Ciampa mounted a campaign of psychological warfare at the expense of his former best friend and tag team partner, Johnny Gargano. This all spewed forth from the twisted mind of a man who perceived that Gargano's interjection at TakeOver Chicago was grandstanding. It wasn't. Ciampa's knee wasn't the only thing broken that night, as DIY was shattered. And while his knee would recover, his friendship and his mind would not. He waited and he watched as his former partner grew and developed into the babyface supreme of NXT, but this was all taken away with a single, well-placed crutch shot. At TakeOver New Orleans, Ciampa, who lives to be evil, entered the ring to no music. The entrance theme is designed to pop the crowd after all, and this wasn't about them, this was about him and him alone. Now, arguably, at the moment of me presenting this video, Ciampa is heel gold and sits alongside The Miz and Samoa Joe as the most over evildoer in the business. Yet this is but one type of heel in wrestling in this current era. I mean, if we look to New Japan, we can see the likes of a surprisingly effective heel in Jay White, who's proving that in order to be hated, all you need to do is to be absolutely vile to the people who the crowd love. Take, for example, when Yoshihashi sliced his head open by accident, and instead of letting the man figure out whether he'd properly damaged himself, Jay waltzed over there, smeared the blood all over himself, and then proceeded to beat him up. It's simple and effective. But before we forget, we need to remember that you don't actually need to wrestle to be over as a heel. I mean, take, for example, Lio Rush, who is just aggressively annoying and quite bluntly just a little shit. Tama Tonga, Sami Callihan, all the people who get rises out of the crowd just from their mic work alone. So you definitely need to be able to not just walk the walk, but talk the talk as well. Which is why we come to this man, classy Freddie Blassie, who in my mind is the greatest heel of all time. Consider this promo for a start. For every hold you know in wrestling, there should be two escapes. Every wrestler knows two escapes. Freddie Blassie knows 3 or 4. And then he followed it up with this: I am greater than any wrestler that has stepped foot in the ring. Now this is the thing, while many wrestlers would go on to say this over and over about being the best, Blassie cut this before the invention of colour television. And didn't just say that he was the best technician or the strongest, he said flat and clearly that he was the best, period. He also spoke about himself in the third person, an instant way to make yourself sound like a dick, to be honest, and one popularised by The Rock to put himself over as a heel upon his return from injury earlier in his career. Now, it got The Rock into the minds of many, but for Blassie, well, it was just another string in his banter bow. The women around here are nothing but pigs. That's another quote from him, and when he was asked what women should wear after calling their clothes potato sacks, he cupped his imaginary breasts and said, form-fitting clothes, something that, well, sorta, you can see what they look like. He was a certified arsehole through and through, and it's a persona that Bobby the Brain Heenan drew from to develop his own uber legend status. But when being interviewed, Blassie wouldn't yell or scream. He simply looked the questioner right in the eye and flat out denied that he cheated or that events weren't 100% above board. The thing is, he didn't need to scream because he was selling the world a man that had bought stock in his own bullshit, and business was booming. Now, I will admit that Blassie had the benefit of being around in a time when Kayfabe was very much alive and enforced, and that shows weren't televised to such an extent that it's hard for actions to carry weight as they move from set piece to set piece. However, the one thing that not many of the main roster will need to deal with today isn't that the fans just booed him, they wanted to murder him. Back in 1964, Blassie clashed with Bruno Sammartino and won. This itself would be enough to incite a riot for most fans, seeing as how Bruno was so over, but Blassie did it in the most disgusting way possible. What he did was, he booted Bruno in the balls, just as Bruno had valiantly attempted to return the referee back to the ring, and that referee subsequently counted Bruno out. As you might expect, the crowd went f***ing mental, and unfortunately, the heel had been marooned by an inexperienced security team. Now, eventually, the heel locker room spilled out to ringside, but amidst the chaos, returned him to the babyface locker room, in which one of Bruno's mega fans and Frank Sinatra's associates, Jilly Rizzo, was waiting. So a quick question. What would you do if the crowd was already rioting and you were in the wrong locker room? And you were faced with Rizzo, who is now drawing a gun from his pocket. Would you A, apologise and drop the act quicker than your mum's knickers? There's my one per editorial. Or would you B, carry on the heel kayfabe and even start to verbally antagonise the person wielding the gun? I'd be out of there so quick there'd be a dust outline of myself. But Blassie, he carried on and was only saved when Bruno, of all people, intervened and said, "No, I'll get him next time, as this is between him and me." The man no-sold potential death. This was but one of many, many examples of his commitment to the bit. And over his lifetime, he'd be stabbed multiple times. Stabbed. You don't see that on the current product, let me tell you that. But for Blassie, it was just another day in the office. Other examples of him being an absolute heel are rife, such as the names that he gave himself. The King of Men. What a goddamn nickname. He was also called the Vampire as well because he sharpened his teeth to draw blood from his opponents with ease, which is just disgusting. And then there's his infamous speech in which he claimed that he caused 92 heart attacks from people yelling at him and getting so upset. And then he ended that with saying, "My ambition was to kill 100. I failed." What a c***. At one point, Los Angeles Times writer Jim Murray once referred to him as the worst villain since Hitler. And he set record TV ratings in Japan whenever he wrestled because people wanted to go out there to see the shit kicked out of him. He was the master of evil wrestling tactics and had a charisma to make the over-the-top nature of his work feel real. Well, real enough to be nearly killed countless times for his art. But I mean, the best part is that the fans didn't love to hate him. They were paying to see him be beaten to a pulp. It was only after he took his management role that he actually won their affection. To top things off, consider this. Vince McMahon considers Blassie to be the greatest of all time. And if there's one thing that we all know well, it's that Vinnie Mac knows how to be evil incarnate as a character. So yeah, classy Blassie. Absolute shit, but what an absolute legend. And those are my thoughts on the greatest heel of all time. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below, as well as your own favourite heels for me to read out in the next episode of GOATs. A massive thank you to Michael Sidgwick for helping me with this show. And as always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you very soon. And you can go follow me at Twitter at RetroJ0. Just check that one in the end. Bye!
And speaking of heel turns, let me turn into my heel character of Jules Gill the Shill and talk to you about the sweet line of t-shirts that we've got out on shop.whatculture.com. We've got Having a Giraffe tees, AWO shirts, and even some one per list tees, which sold out twice. Ridiculous. Do me a favour and check them out if you've got the time. Love you loads. Thank you very much.